Welcome back to another episode in our template design series, and today we're going to look at the Hogsback, which is a personal favourite of the templates and one that's taken me a while to really appreciate, but it's probably one of the ones that gives you the most variety and you can use really creatively and there's loads of different spins you can look at. We're going to look at a few, but honestly there's loads more. We're here starting at Shawnee Run and we're going to look at the 14th to begin. So what is a Hogsback? Well, a Hogsback essentially is a fairway that features a pronounced spine in the middle of it, which will ideally reward a drive dead centre of the fairway. So imagine you're coming at it this way. The drive dead centre is going to get a little bit of bounce forward and kick on, whereas drives left or right might kick either off the fairway, some do, that feels very penal, so a lot of people dial that down in game, or it might kick to a less ideal angle. Now the first one we're going to look at is this one at Shawnee Run, and you can see that a drive dead centre is going to be rewarded. With so many templates that we look at really rewarding you for playing to either side of the fairway, this can be a really nice change up of just rewarding people for hitting dead centre, because certainly I don't tend to do that very often. Now with this one, it is on a slight angle, so there's a little bit of an element of prize dog leg, not really, but you want to think about where over the corner you're aiming, where it's going to carry to. And it is the spine itself is on a tiny bit of the diagonal. More on that later. So the base of this template is actually very simple. It's a really simple idea, but where the variety comes is that there's so many ways you can use that in combination with the green. So let's have a little look at this one. You'll straight away see, and this is probably my current favourite way of doing this, a little mirror image of the spine here. That therefore means in order to attack this left hand pin, you probably want to be on the left hand side in order to avoid that little spine and coming over it. For a right hand pin, you probably want to be on the right hand side so that you can use it as a backstop. So a really subtle distinction, but if we look at our angle from here versus our angle from over here, and you can see just how much of a difference that makes. You've then got some back pins where, to be honest, you could be probably either side. I'd suggest due to this little shelf here, you probably want for this back left pin, you probably want to go right, and for back right pin you probably want to go left to open up the green as much as possible. So it's one of those where if you're standing on the tee with a caddy, you'd probably need to know where the pin is ideally before you tee off. But dead centre is going to be good for any one of these pins. So we'll have a look at hitting a drive and see how that goes. Tiny bit of a fast, so I'm anticipating going just over and down the left hand side. And in actual fact, because of the diagonal nature, we've kind of gone through the Hogsback a touch, but as you can see we've got a pretty good angle to attack this pin, and we'd be able to hit either a slightly de-lofted sand wedge or we hit up on a gap wedge a little bit. So that's the core tenet of this template. It's really fairly straightforward. It's when you start plugging it into different hole designs and types that you start seeing the versatility it really has. Back once again at Raynor Ridge for a look at the Hogsback there, and that's the 16th. As you can see here, we've got this ravine down the left hand side, which is a really cool feature and pops up throughout the round. If you hit way left, you're absolutely dead, and as ever the green is angled so that it's slightly more receptive from this side. Particularly for this pin, it's challenging you to just hedge bet slightly over to the left. But really what a Hogsback does is it asks you to hit the centre of the fairway. And as we can see, the centre is nice and straightforward, but every inch left we go. So if we're looking at driver distance, we're at this point 3 up, so that part is dead flat, whereas then 2, 1, -1. It's nothing huge, but given the angle of the fairway as well, anything kind of here and over is going to be running off the fairway. So whilst the fairway looks wide, it's actually a lot more pinched than it is. If we were to drop back to 3 wood, you can see the same sort of thing happening here, less so on this side, but you do have a little bit more to play with where the fairway runs out and angles in. And looking at this pin as well, you've got a bit of a mirror of that Hogsback spine coming through the green as well, which is a nice little touch. And it does offer you a way to get at this pin, particularly if you're slightly out of position. Again, kind of mitigating that difficulty. So it's a subtle version of the Hogsback, it's still very much there, and it will also impact your stance whether you're one side of the fairway or not. The reason I wanted to show this one is not all Hogsback fairways need to be absolutely in your face obvious with the sloping. They can be subtle and just do exactly the same thing. So that's the basic premise. So what spins can you put on this? Well, the first one we're going to look at is Strathlorne 7th, which is one of my favourite holes on the course, and it's a long par 4. I think with a shot like this where you're basically allowing the player to hit the fairway unless you're kicking them off, you probably want to keep length makes sense on this hole. Plus you want the ball to bounce out, you want people to hit driver, so having driver in hand makes sense. With this one, where it slightly differs is that you've actually got an upper shelf of the fairway on the right hand side and a lower shelf down here. You very much have this spine going through the middle, and that does continue all the way through into the green and that lovely left hand side runoff, although the green slopes do their own very interesting things. So what about this hole makes it, how does this work given that we're going with two shelves? Well, first of all, downwind, this bunker is very much in play even though it doesn't look it, and so you want to be really careful if you're going downwind and you're aiming for the upper shelf. Well, if you pull that downwind, you're probably ending up in there. If you had a shorter driver, well, maybe this bunker is coming into play, particularly into a headwind, so maybe you can't reach the upper shelf. Why would you want to reach the upper shelf? Well, we go back to the spine and how that's interacting here. The more you're coming in from the left, the more you're going in over that spine, and you'll see that the green mounding kind of runs the ball away from you as soon as you land it on there. The more you're coming in from the right, you've got a bit of a better look down the green. You can use some of these slopes in really fun ways. These two slopes will kind of funnel the ball towards this pin here. So actually for this pin, you want to be landing it way short here and just running it on and using those two to guide it just to where you want it to finish up. For a pin back here, well, you can use that big slope there. If you're coming in from the left, that's a lot harder to use. You've got to land it about here and just run up and then come back down. So if you're coming in from the right hand side, because you've got more of a channel and more room to land it, the ball is, you've got more margin for error again. Really, this one is a very long par 4, 497. It doesn't play its distance due to the downhill nature of it, but what it does do, it doesn't penalise you massively for being out of position off the tee, but the tee shot's got interest. On a really long par 4, I generally think you're looking for forgiveness off the tee in that you've got a really wide fairway. People can kind of hit wherever and they've still got a shot, but where do you really want to be? Probably up here. Is that side a little bit more difficult to hold? Yeah, because if you pull it and you're probably ending up down here, and it's not really a full shot penalty by any means, but it does make your approach shot a little bit more challenging. So the next we're going to look at is the 5th at Old Ainsdale, and when we randomised the plot right at the beginning, this natural landform of this hogsback spine was I think the very first feature I ever saw on the course, and I always had visions of having this spine going diagonally featuring as kind of the prime feature of one of the holes. And it turned into this 5th hole, which is one that I absolutely love and I think has a great green sight and obviously benefits from lovely lighting as well. So how is this any different to the other diagonal spine hole that we looked at? Well, first of all, you can just hit the centre of the spine and go dead straight. You can also, if you're too greedy with the long driver, you can kick off either into a bunker or into the heavy rough. And for this course, which was designed to host a major, that kind of felt fair. If you want to hit 3-wood, you very much can do, and you can end up here, or you can trundle off this way as well. So what I really used the hogsback spine for on this one was really just to exaggerate the angles. If you're basically with this spine saying, well, no ball is realistically, I mean, bar the odd one that hangs up there, here to here, you're probably not like ending up on that. So that bit of fairway in terms of angles going into the green is kind of unusable. Very few people are going to stay on the dead centre of the fairway. And the more aggressive you were, or the more the land's moving, and the more you're potentially running off. So actually it did kind of narrow the fairway as well with how extreme the contours became. So therefore you might see people laying up over here, you might see people trying to hit a driver just down here and hold on to the left side, you might see people bombing it straight down the middle and hoping they hit it. But it was actually a fairly tricky fairway to hit. Now, we talked about exaggerating the angles, well, where did you want to be? For the most part, due to these 3 bunkers here, the more you could be coming up the green from this angle, the better. You're also, if you look long, you've got water. If you're coming into this side, you're hitting more dead at it. This side, not so much. So you really wanted to be on the right hand side, and yet that's the one that's harder to hit, certainly with driver. We wanted to reward you going dead down the centre of the fairway, so hitting here, you can end up there, you've got a wedge in and you've got a good angle. Or you could lay up and hit to around about here and you've still got that angle. And we'll try doing that and see how that works. Interested to see what a 3-wood lives us in this game. So in the previous game we'd have had 2-wood, which was 253 odd carry, and those 2 bunkers would have been in play as well if you were downwind. So you're left with a long approach, but kind of as with the one you saw on Strathlorne, there are some green slopes to help you. If you're running it in from this side, landing here, you can use that little slope to run the ball pretty close to the pin. And let's give that a go as well while we're here. So I don't tend to take that many shots when we're doing these. Lovely animation. Fingers crossed that makes it just over the false front. And as you can see, the angle that we got means that this is a far more... That's how you do it. That's a far more doable shot from that angle than if you're coming dead over these bunkers, trying to stop it absolutely dead on very firm greens. Now, there were other pins where you might want to be in slightly different positions. The one back here was scary as hell. There's also one front right where if you were coming at it from the right, you're running into this slope and therefore having to stop it really short, kind of landing here and judging runoff. So we're going to finish up by looking at one final twist, and that's the 18th at Greenstone River. Now, I did soften this when I paused it, but the original version was very, very harsh with the spine really protruding. It still functions in exactly the same way, it's just, it was like my 3rd course. So, what's interesting about this one is that the spine does not follow one straight path, it kind of curves around following the fairway. The second part of this, and we'll come back to the spine, is I also paired it with a lion's mouth. And again, it was kind of in the vein of the one that we've just looked at Old Ainsdale. It's really exaggerating angles and how do you kind of provide people of ways of getting around the lion's mouth. So, as you can see, you've got 2 very distinct areas of the fairway that you might want to hit. With this hogsback, just giving you different ways in which you can access those. And you could always hit to like the dead end of the fairway, probably your shortest shot in. So that was an option as well. You could lay up. What I liked most about this one with how you could use the land movement is thinking about where you land it versus where the ball ultimately ends up, and this kind of harks back to my background with links golf. So let's say you were hitting a 3-wood to around about here. Well, all of the land is moving down this way, so even though you're landing there, you're probably ending up here. So if you didn't quite have the club to carry this bunker, or didn't want to take on the water or anything like that, you didn't have to. And I think a hogsback can be used really nicely to reward people who think about how they might be playing shots and where the ball might end up. When we got over to this side, because of the fact that it was turning round, there's a lot going on with this hole, it became relatively flat here actually. I always thought it kind of went back towards you, but maybe not. But if you went a bit too aggressive, you're potentially running through the fairway. So you had to really be challenging just clearing this bunker and landing kind of within that square in order to hold the fairway, and that was your risk on that side. Now, there is lots going on in this hole. Is that a traditional hogsback? Absolutely not. But I do think it's one of those that I would not make this hole now, and yet I think it's really interesting just because there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing here that I'm not brave enough to do anymore, because in my head I go, that's silly and that's a little bit too contrived, and yeah, I think it's quite a fun hole. The green itself, well, you've got one pin down here with a little backstop for if you're coming at it from that side. If you're coming at it from the other side, good luck. You've got a back pin, and actually you've got a lot of slope here that, if memory serves, even if you're right on the other side, you can kind of run the ball pretty much all the way down just by hitting this slope, and it gently rolls down towards this pin. The one here, couple of options as to how you do it. Either you could end up near the end of the fairway, or you can run it round using this slope. And then for this one, I would suggest you could either be this side, or you could be over here, because that means you're playing away from the bunker. This one was always kind of about choice. So yeah, definitely a different spin on hogsback here, but one that I really enjoyed. So that's our hogsback. In reality, this has kind of become just a bit of a treatise on how to use ground game in order to add options, and the benefits of wide fairways where the ball bounces and reacts in different ways. But the core of it, I think, is one where you either want to encourage people to hit the centre of the fairway or get them to see how the land moves either side of it, and ways in which that you can make that shot interesting. I hope you found this useful as ever, and see you again soon.